It's been 5 years since the papers were signed, but I still see her sometimes. Not in person, but in the way the light hits an empty coffee cup, or in the echo of a laugh that isn't hers. I don't bring her up in conversation anymore. Not at work, not with friends, not even when my sister asks, "You ever hear from her?" In that careful voice people use when they're afraid of stirring something up. I just shake my head, take a sip of whatever's in front of me, and let the silence stretch until someone changes the subject. But she's there. In the way I still turn my head when I catch a whiff of that vanilla perfume she used to wear, the one she'd spray on before bed, like she was trying to sweeten her dreams. In the way I automatically reach for 2 plates when setting the table, even though it's just me now. In the way I pause before deleting old voicemails, my thumb hovering over the trash icon, as if some part of me still expects to hear her voice. The thing is, I've moved on. At least, I've convinced myself I have. I don't wake up with that hollow ache in my chest anymore. I don't check her social media. I don't drive past our old house when I'm in town. I've trained myself not to look back, but she hasn't. Or maybe she can't. Because every now and then, like clockwork, she finds a way back in. Last winter, I got a Christmas card from her mother, a woman who never liked me much when we were married, but who still sends me a card every December, signed in that same looping cursive. "Hope you're well," it said, like we were distant cousins instead of two people bound by a decade of shared history. I almost threw it out, but then I noticed the postscript. "Lynn misses you." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully her. Lynn never could let things go quietly. If she wasn't sending messages through her mother, she was texting me out of the blue, usually late at night, usually after a drink or two. "Remember that diner we used to go to after fights?" Or, "I found your old sweater. Do you want it back?" I never answered. Not because I'm cruel, but because I knew where those conversations led. Nowhere good, nowhere new. Just the same old loop of nostalgia and regret, spinning us backward instead of forward. And yet, sometimes, when I'm sitting on my porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, I wonder if I'm the one who got it wrong. Maybe moving on isn't about never looking back. Maybe it's about looking back without letting it pull you under. But then I think of Lynn, of how she kept our wedding photos in a shoebox under her bed, of how she still asks mutual friends about me, of how she called me a year after the divorce, her voice raw with tears, asking, "Did you ever really love me?" And I know. I had mourned us long before the ink dried on the divorce papers. She only started after it was over. That's the difference between us, I guess. I let go. She held on. And now, 5 years later, I'm sitting here with a coffee cup in my hand, staring at the ring it left on the counter, a perfect, fading circle. And I realize some stains don't ever really disappear. You just learn to live with them. I didn't fall out of love with her. I just realized love wasn't enough to keep us from destroying each other. It happened on a Tuesday. Not some dramatic, stormy night, just an ordinary Tuesday in November, the kind where the sky can't decide if it wants to rain or not. We were in the kitchen, me leaning against the counter, her sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The air between us was thick with all the things we hadn't said for months. "You're not happy," she said. Not a question, a fact. I remember staring at the fridge door, at the grocery list still pinned there in her neat handwriting. Milk, eggs, bread, the mundane remnants of a life we were failing at. "I don't think you are, either," I said. She let out a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "We used to talk about everything. Now we just orbit each other." That was the word for it. Orbit. Two people circling the same space, never colliding, never touching, just moving in tired, predictable loops. We had become experts at avoiding landmines, skirting around politics, her mother, my drinking, the miscarriages. Every conversation felt like diffusing a bomb with trembling hands. I could have lied then, could have said we'll figure it out, like I had 100 times before. But something in me was just tired. The kind of tired that sinks into your bones and makes a home there. "I think we're done," I said. The silence that followed wasn't the shocked kind. It was the quiet of something inevitable finally arriving. She didn't cry, didn't yell, just pressed her thumb into a chip on the edge of her mug, a chip I'd put there 2 years earlier when I'd dropped it in the sink. "You mean that?" she said. "Yeah." She nodded slowly, like she was translating my words into a language she could understand. Then she stood up, poured her cold tea down the drain, and said, "Okay." That was the worst part. How easy it was. No grand explosion, no shattered dishes. Just two people who'd run out of ways to pretend. The next month was a blur of paperwork and dividing possessions with the efficiency of strangers. She took the wedding album. I took the dog. She kept the cast iron skillet her grandmother gave us. I kept the record player we'd bought on our first anniversary. We were civil, polite, like we were trying to prove we could end things without becoming monsters. But then, the night before I moved out, I found her sitting on the bedroom floor with one of my old t-shirts in her hands. She wasn't crying, just holding it like she was memorizing the weight of it. "You mourned us already, didn't you?" she asked. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. She folded the shirt carefully, set it in my suitcase, and said, "I wish you'd told me sooner." That was the last real conversation we ever had in that house. The next morning, I loaded up my truck while she watched from the doorway, arms crossed against the cold. I waited for her to say something, anything, but she just stood there, her face unreadable. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was still there, a shrinking figure in the distance, growing smaller and smaller until I turned the corner and she was gone. I thought that would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The first year was easier than I expected, harder than I admitted. I threw myself into work, the kind of relentless focus where you look up at 3 p.m. realizing you forgot lunch and 9 p.m. realizing you forgot to live. My assistant started leaving protein bars on my desk. My boss clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Good to see you channeling it productively." Nobody said what it was. Nobody had to. She kept the house. I kept the dog. Max, our golden retriever, became my shadow, following me from room to empty room in my new apartment. He'd pause sometimes at the door, ears perked like he expected her to walk in. So would I. The text started about 3 months in, always at night, always with that telltale ellipsis appearing and disappearing before the message finally came through. "Do you remember? I was just thinking about. Max ever ask about me?" I never knew how to answer, so mostly I didn't, but I'd stare at those glowing words until my eyes burned, remembering how she'd bite her lower lip while typing, how she'd laugh at her own typos, how she'd. No. That way lay madness. I changed my number after the 6th month, not because I was cruel, because I was weak, and because I found myself waiting for those messages, dreading and craving them in equal measure. Mutual friends became reluctant messengers. "She asks about you," they'd say, then quickly change the subject when my jaw tightened. Once, at a bar, one of her girlfriends slid into the seat across from me. "She goes to your old coffee shop every Sunday," she said. "Sits at your table, orders your drink." I pushed my beer away. "Why are you telling me this?" She looked at me like I'd missed the point entirely. "Because someone should." That night, I drove past the coffee shop, saw her through the window, curled in our corner booth, staring into a cup of black coffee she never used to drink. My hands shook on the wheel. I didn't stop. The holidays came. Our anniversary passed. I marked the dates in my mind like graves I couldn't visit. My sister invited me for Christmas. Her eyes flicked to my left hand when she thought I wasn't looking. The phantom weight of my wedding ring was heavier than the real thing ever had been. Spring brought an unexpected mercy, a job offer in another state. I took it immediately, packed my life into boxes, loaded Max into the car, and didn't look back as the city skyline faded in the rear view mirror. The new city smelled different, felt different. Nobody knew me as half of a couple here. I was just another middle-aged man starting over, his history invisible to strangers. I liked that. Then, one rainy Tuesday, exactly 11 months after the divorce, my phone rang. An unknown number with our old area code. I knew before answering, knew from the way my breath caught, from the way Max's head snapped up at the sudden tension in my posture. Her voice was whiskey rough. Did you ever really love me? The question hung between us, stretching across state lines and all the things we'd never said. I closed my eyes, saw her sitting on our bedroom floor with my t-shirt in her hands, saw her watching me drive away, saw her in that coffee shop drinking my coffee at our table. My silence answered for me. When she spoke again, her voice was breaking. I think you mourned us while we were still together. I only started after you left. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. She was right. I'd been letting go for years before I walked out the door. She was just beginning. We didn't say goodbye. Just hung up, the quiet after the storm. Outside, the rain kept falling. Max rested his head on my knee, and for the first time since the divorce, I cried. The call changed something. Not in the way I expected, not some grand revelation or sudden clarity, but in small, almost imperceptible ways, like when you notice the days getting shorter in autumn, not because of any single moment, but because one evening you realize it's dark before dinner. I started dreaming about her. Not the painful, aching dreams of the early months, but strange, mundane ones. Her laughing at a joke I hadn't told. Her folding laundry in the living room of an apartment I didn't recognize. Once I dreamed she was standing in my kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, and when I said her name, she turned and looked at me like I was the ghost. I didn't tell anyone about the dreams, not my therapist, not my sister, certainly not the woman I'd started seeing casually. A divorcee named Diane who liked jazz and didn't ask questions about my past. Some things you keep to yourself because they're too fragile to survive being spoken aloud. Then, 6 months after that phone call, I got an email. No subject line, just my name at the top, and 4 sentences. I drove by our old house today. The new owners painted the front door red. It looks wrong. I sat in the car and cried for 20 minutes. I read it 3 times before closing my laptop. That night, I found myself standing in my kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at the fridge where no grocery lists hung anymore, wondering what color her front door was now, wondering if she still drank tea cold, wondering if she ever woke up in the dark and reached for someone who wasn't there. I didn't reply. But the next weekend, I did something stupid. I drove back. Not to see her. I told myself that firmly as I merged onto the interstate. Just to look at the house. Just to see that red door for myself. Just to prove I could stand there without crumbling. The drive took 4 hours. I played an old playlist we used to love, then turned it off when too many memories surfaced. Max slept in the back seat, oblivious. When I pulled up to the curb, the first thing I noticed was the tree we'd planted in the front yard was gone, just a flat circle of dirt where it had been. The second thing I noticed was the door, a bright, cheerful red that looked violently out of place against the muted gray siding. I rolled down the window. The neighborhood smelled the same, cut grass and distant barbecue. A kid's bike lay overturned in the next yard over. Normal life, continuing without us. Then I saw her car, parked 3 houses down, facing me, a familiar silver sedan with the dent in the rear bumper from when I'd backed into the mailbox. My breath caught. She was sitting inside, perfectly still, watching the house just like I was. I don't know how long we stayed like that. 2 ghosts haunting the same street. 5 minutes? 10? The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the lawn. Finally, she started her car. For one wild moment, I thought she might drive over, might roll down her window and say something that would either fix us or break us completely. Instead, she pulled away. Slowly. Like she was giving me time to follow. I didn't. When her taillights disappeared around the corner, I put my truck in gear and headed for the highway. Max yawned in the back seat. The radio played some forgettable pop song. The world kept turning. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at that email for a long time. Then I typed a single line and hit send before I could think better of it. The tree's gone too. Her reply came an hour later. Just 3 words. I know, goodbye. This time, I believed her. Years pass differently after loss. The first one drags, each month a slow unraveling. The second moves quicker. By the third, You stop counting. I didn't hear from her again after that email. No late night calls, no messages through friends. Just silence, the kind that settles deep, like snow muffling a landscape. I sold the truck and bought a sedan. Max grew gray around his muzzle. Diane and I parted ways amicably when she moved to Portland. Life, as it does, went on. Then last spring, my sister called. You'll never guess who I ran into. I knew before she said the name. There was only one person she'd announce like that. She looked good, my sister continued. Happy. She asked about you. I waited, watching sunlight stripe the kitchen floor. What did you tell her? The truth? That you're okay? Okay. Such a small word for such a complicated state. Not healed, not broken, just living alongside the scars. That night, I dug out an old shoebox from the back of my closet. Inside, ticket stubs from movies we'd seen, a dried corsage from some wedding we'd attended, a single earring she'd left on my dresser. I sifted through these fragments like an archaeologist studying a civilization that no longer existed. At the bottom was a photo of us at the beach, squinting against the sun. I couldn't remember who'd taken it. We looked so young, so sure. I almost threw it all away. Instead, I put the lid back on and returned the box to the closet. Some histories deserve their resting places. Last month, I was in a bookstore when a familiar laugh cut through the quiet. My head snapped up, but of course, it wasn't her, just a stranger with a similar cadence. Still, I stood frozen between the shelves, heart pounding, as the sound echoed through me like a bell tolling across years. That's when I understood. She'll always be there. In unexpected laughter, in the scent of vanilla on a passing stranger, in the way certain songs still make my chest tighten. But here's the thing no one tells you about moving on. It's not a destination. It's a daily choice. Some days you forget to look back. Some days you drown in it. Most days you just live. I don't hate her. I don't miss her. But I understand why she did. Grief isn't linear. Some people get stuck in the what-ifs, circling the past like planets trapped in orbit. Others, like me, drift further away with each passing year, but never quite escape the gravity. I hope one day she stops looking for me in the past. I'm not there anymore.